The air inside the Grand Horizon Hall shimmered with light and noise. Hundreds of cameras flashed as Adrian Cole, founder and CEO of Cole Dynamics, walked across the glass stage under a cascade of digital fireworks. Screens the size of buildings behind him played the new slogan of his company, "Because the future deserves vision." Every seat was taken, every journalist waiting for a quote that would turn into tomorrow's headline. Adrian adjusted his cufflinks, his reflection flickering across the teleprompter. His voice came steady, practiced, precise. Innovation isn't just what we do, it's who we are. The audience applauded. He smiled the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. From the corner of his vision, his phone lit up on the podium. One glance. The caller ID froze him mid-sentence. St. Luke's Hospital. He hesitated, letting the applause fill the silence he left. He should ignore it. Tonight was his night, the night investors would double his market value. Yet the phone vibrated again, insistent like something alive. A quiet voice in his head said, "Answer it." He turned slightly away from the crowd and pressed the phone to his ear. "Mr. Cole, this is Nurse Morales from St. Luke's Hospital. You're listed as the only emergency contact for a patient named Maya Bennett." His breath caught. "I'm sorry, what she's in critical condition, sir. We need you to come immediately." The noise of the hall fell away, replaced by the pounding of his own heartbeat. Maya Bennett, he repeated, trying to remember where he had heard that name today. His assistant, the one who never complained, who made his impossible schedule work like clockwork. He remembered her saying she wasn't feeling well that morning, asking to leave early. He barely looked up when she spoke. The crowd began to chant, his name cameras flashing. He turned the microphone off. "Tell me exactly what happened." "She collapsed at home," the nurse replied. "No family was reachable. You're her only listed contact." He blinked hard. Her only contact. The words tasted unreal. He looked out over the crowd of thousands and suddenly felt the strangest sense of isolation. "I'll be there," he said, "right away." The nurse gave him the address. He didn't remember ending the call. The world moved around him, hands shaking his cameras, clicking, people smiling. "Mr. Cole, a few words for CNBC," someone shouted. But Adrian's ears filled with the echo of that sentence, "You're her only contact." As he stepped off stage, the LED wall behind him shifted to the company motto, "Because people matter." The irony sliced through him. Outside Manhattan glittered under cold December air. The limousine waited, door already open. His PR chief caught up breathless. "Adrian, the after-parties at the Waldorf. You have the keynote press in 20 minutes. He ignored her, sliding into the car. "Take me to St. Luke's Hospital," he told the driver. "Now." "Sir, you heard me." The driver hesitated only a second before pulling into traffic. Through the tinted glass, the city's neon raced past in blurs of red and gold. Adrian loosened his tie, staring at his reflection. Maya's name echoed again in his head, but now it carried the weight of guilt. He thought of the hundreds of mornings she brought him coffee. Her quiet, "Good morning, Mr. Cole." Her calm voice managing his chaos. He realized he had never once asked if she was okay. 10 years of corporate triumphs, and he could barely remember the color of her eyes. At the next red light, he saw a billboard for Axiom Biotech, glowing over Times Square, the pharmaceutical partner that would finalize a multi-billion merger with his company next month. The irony made his stomach twist. The nurse's words replayed again. Critical condition. He pictured Maya alone in a hospital bed, monitors beeping, nobody beside her. Why would she put him as her emergency contact? She must have known he wouldn't come. Yet here he was, heart-racing sweat, dampening the collar of his shirt. The driver glanced in the mirror. "You all right, sir? Just drive." Traffic thickened near the hospital district. Ambulances screamed past lights, cutting through the night like electric veins. Adrian's phone buzzed again, his board group chat lighting up with messages' brilliant speech. "You killed it out there. Dinner at the Waldorf, don't be late." He turned the phone face down. When the car stopped, he stepped into the freezing air. St. Luke's loomed tall and sterile, its glass doors swallowing him whole. Inside, the scent of disinfectant burned his nose. Nurses rushed by, wheels of gurneys squealing against tile. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you, Sir Maya Bennett?" he said. "They called me. I'm her contact." The nurse typed quickly, then nodded toward the elevators. "ICU floor 9. She's stable but unconscious." He moved before she finished speaking. In the elevator, his reflection trembled in the mirrored walls. He looked like a stranger, a man who had built empires, and yet was powerless to stop a single heartbeat from fading. The doors opened. The corridor stretched endless and silent, except for the faint rhythm of monitors. He found her room by the small plaque on the wall, Bennett Maya. She lay there pale against the white sheets, her dark hair damp against her forehead. An oxygen tube traced her lips. Machines hummed quietly beside her, displaying lines of fragile life. He stepped closer, his shoes barely making a sound. The nurse looked up. "You're her employer." He nodded. Her only contact, she confirmed softly, as if repeating the truth he still refused to accept. He sat down beside her bed. For a long moment he simply watched her chest rise and fall. Then, almost without thinking, he reached forward and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Her skin felt cold. His throat tightened. In the silence, the world that once revolved around profits and power fell away. All that remained was the steady beeping of her heart monitor and the echo of a sentence that would follow him forever. "You're her only contact." The hospital corridor stretched before him, a tunnel of light and muted sound. Machines beeped faintly, footsteps echoed, and the antiseptic air felt sharp enough to sting. Adrian followed Nurse Morales to the small glass room at the end. "She's stable for now," the nurse said quietly, opening the door. Maya lay there pale and still, her lips almost colorless. Her hair framed her face in dark waves, damp against the pillow. Tubes traced from her wrist to a machine that pulsed with digital life. Adrian stood at the threshold, uncertain if he was allowed to enter this world of fragility. The nurse gestured gently. "You can come closer." She can't respond, but sometimes they can hear. He took a hesitant step forward. His voice, usually so firm, came out thin. "What happened to her severe bone marrow failure?" the nurse said. "Likely caused by a rare genetic condition. She's been skipping treatment, and her system just couldn't compensate anymore." Skipping treatment. His brows furrowed. "Why would she do that?" "That's something you'd have to ask her," the nurse replied. "We found an insurance rejection in her file. The medication she needed isn't covered. The trial she was part of ended months ago." Adrian blinked. "Trial A, clinical one, run by Axiom Biotech," she said. "Do you know them?" The name hit him like a blow. Of course he did. Axiom Biotech, the partner he was about to sign a billion-dollar merger with. He turned away, jaw tightening. "Who approved her for that program?" "She was already enrolled before she came to work for you. She must have withdrawn when coverage stopped." The nurse's tone softened. It's not uncommon. Once the financial aid runs out, people get scared. Some stop altogether. Adrian exhaled the air, leaving his chest in one long, controlled breath. Is she going to be okay? We're doing everything we can, Morales said. Dr. Patel will be with you shortly. Adrian nodded and sat in the chair beside Maya's bed. Her hand resting against the blanket looked impossibly small. He hesitated before touching it, feeling the coolness of her skin. The steady pulse of the heart monitor became the only sound anchoring him. His mind, trained to solve crises, tried to structure this one diagnosis strategize act, but no spreadsheet could fix a failing body. He looked at her face, relaxed in sleep, and realized how little he knew about the woman who had orchestrated every minute of his life for 2 years. She remembered his flights, his favorite whiskey, his father's birthday, his mother's charity events. And yet he had never noticed when she began looking tired, when her suits hung loose, when her laughter in the office kitchen faded to polite smiles. The door opened and a doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Mr. Cole, I'm Dr. Patel. I'm overseeing Ms. Bennett's care. Her tone was professional, but carried a note of compassion. She's critically anemic with dangerously low platelet levels. We're waiting on results to determine whether she's still eligible for transplant. What does she need? Adrian asked. Bone marrow donor match, Dr. Patel said, and renewed approval for treatment. But since she withdrew from the trial, reinstatement will be complicated. Money's not the issue, Adrian said automatically. The doctor studied him. It's not always about money. Axiom's trials have strict criteria. They dropped her from the program after she missed too many sessions. Apparently she didn't explain why. Adrian frowned. And no one noticed she was this sick. Dr. Patel gave a tired smile. People hide things, Mr. Cole, especially when they're proud. He looked back at Maya. Proud. Yes, that word fit her perfectly. The kind of quiet pride that made her refuse help, that let her show up every morning as if her world wasn't collapsing. He remembered the way she used to stand by his desk tablet, in hand posture, straight, her voice steady even under pressure. He had admired that efficiency, not realizing it was armor. If she's stable, can I see her file? He asked. Only with her consent, Dr. Patel replied. Privacy laws. Then when she wakes up, I want to talk to her, he said. She'll need to understand the options. She may wake by morning, Patel said. But prepare yourself. This kind of condition isn't cured overnight. When the doctor left, Adrian leaned back, hands clasped in front of his face. The rhythmic beeping slowed, matching his breathing. Outside the window, New York glittered, uncaring, a field of distant stars over glass towers. His phone vibrated with a flood of missed calls, messages from the board, from Axiom executives, demanding to confirm the merger announcement. He ignored them all. In the quiet room, his empire felt irrelevant. He looked at Maya again, noticing the small details. A silver bracelet on her wrist engraved faintly with initials MB, a tiny charm shaped like a typewriter key, a writer's relic, a memory of a life before corporate anonymity. He brushed another lock of hair from her cheek, and this time his touch lingered. For the first time in his adult life, Adrian Cole didn't know what to do. He had built companies from nothing. Outmaneuvered competitors, survived Wall Street collapses, yet here he sat powerless, watching the only person who'd ever shown him silent loyalty fight for breath. He whispered under his breath, You didn't tell me, Maya. Why didn't you tell me? The monitor beeped, steady and indifferent. When the nurse came to adjust the IV, he stood aside. "She's lucky to have someone here," she said softly. He gave a humorless smile. "You're wrong. I should have been here a long time ago." "Sometimes it takes a shock to see what's been right in front of us," Morales said. Her words cut deeper than intended. When she left, Adrian looked around the sterile room again. One chair, one bed, one beeping machine that decided if she stayed alive. He'd spent his life surrounded by people, but had never felt this kind of aloneness. His phone buzzed once more, flashing a message from Axiom's CEO. "Looking forward to finalizing tomorrow. Call me." He stared at it until the screen went black. Then quietly he turned it off. For once, he didn't want to hear about profits or projections. He wanted to understand how a woman could vanish into exhaustion unnoticed by the man who claimed to see everything. He reached out again, his fingers trembling slightly, and smoothed the sheet beside her. "I'm here now," he said softly, almost a promise, though he didn't know to whom. Outside the hospital, lights flickered against the dawn, and for the first time Adrian Cole felt the weight of what control could never buy, the fear of losing something human. The sun had barely risen when Adrian stepped out of the hospital, the city still washed in early gray light. The December wind clawed through his coat as he walked toward the car. He didn't head home or to the office. Instead, he told the driver to take him to Brooklyn. He had one address from the hospital intake forms, Maya's apartment. The building was modest, the kind of place people passed without noticing, with rusting mailboxes and paint peeling from the railings. He hesitated before buzzing the superintendent. "I'm here on behalf of Maya Bennett," he said, flashing his ID as though it mattered. "She's in the hospital. They need some documents from her home for her treatment." The super looked him up and down, taking in the $1,000 coat and the exhaustion behind his eyes. "She's a good tenant," the man said after a pause. "Quiet always pays on time. Go ahead." Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of coffee and floor cleaner. He found her apartment on the 3rd floor. The door creaked open with a reluctant sigh. The place was small but meticulously kept. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains falling across a couch. Patched at the corners, a stack of books beside it, and a small desk cluttered with papers. On the wall hung framed clippings from old newspapers' headlines about ethics and medicine investigative awards, stories signed Maya Bennett. Adrian froze. He moved closer, scanning the bylines, the dates, the publication names. She had been a journalist, an investigative one. One article's headline made his pulse quicken: "The Hidden Cost of Axiom's Miracle Drug." He read the first paragraph, heart pounding. The piece detailed how Axiom Biotech had covered up data showing severe side effects in early clinical trials, silencing whistleblowers through legal intimidation. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. Another frame held a photo of Maya at a press conference standing behind a podium, defiant, surrounded by flashing cameras. Beneath it, a newspaper excerpt, independent reporter, Maya Bennett sued by Axiom Biotech for defamation after exposing alleged safety cover-up. He sat down slowly, the realization spreading like fire through his mind. She hadn't just been a reporter, she'd been the reporter who challenged the very company he had built his partnership with. The lawsuit had made national headlines 5 years ago. He remembered reading about it, then dismissing it as noise. A young journalist accused of fabricating data to attack a corporation. He hadn't known her name, but she had been right there bleeding for the truth he had ignored. His eyes shifted to the desk. A laptop sat open the screen asleep. When he touched the trackpad, it woke to a document titled Letter to the Editor, Draft. He read the first line. Sometimes silence is safer than justice, but silence kills too. The words cut deep. He glanced around the apartment again, noticing small signs of her private life. A half-finished mug of tea, 2 unpaid medical bills tucked under a notepad, a photo of a girl about 12 on the refrigerator with a note, Ellie, don't forget your scarf. A niece, maybe, or a foster child she mentored. He found an envelope beside the computer, addressed to Axiom Legal Department unsent. Inside a letter of withdrawal from the clinical trial, dated 3 months ago. The words were formal, but between the lines he read despair. Due to financial hardship and relocation, I must withdraw from the program effective immediately. The bills beside it confirmed what the nurse had said. Insurance partial coverage. Remaining balance $87,400. Past due. He felt sick. She had been drowning quietly while he was celebrating quarterly growth. The more he looked, the more details formed a portrait of a woman carrying too much alone. The bookshelf by her bed held both investigative journalism manuals and children's books about self-esteem and resilience. On top of the stack sat a worn journal, the cover soft from use. He hesitated before opening it, then flipped through the pages filled with neat handwriting, fragments of thoughts. Day 47, treatment side effects worse. Don't tell anyone at work. Don't show weakness. Day 63, saw Adrian smile today when the deal came through. He never notices me, but that's okay. Some people are just meant to stay in the background. Day 91, can't afford next session. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's enough. His chest tightened. He closed the book, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't supposed to be here invading the privacy of a woman who had never asked for pity. Yet something inside him told him he needed to understand. Because if he didn't, he would keep being the man who looked past people like her, who mistook strength for invisibility. His phone buzzed again. The name flashing on screen made his blood run cold. Victor Lang, Axiom Biotech. He stared at it, then answered. Adrian, congratulations on last night. Lang's voice boomed through the speaker. Hell of a show. The market's loving it. Adrian didn't respond. You sound tired, my friend. Late night, I'm at a hospital, Adrian said evenly. One of my employees collapsed. That's unfortunate. Nothing serious, I hope. She was part of your trial program, Adrian said. There was a brief pause. You'll have to be more specific, Lang replied. Maya Bennett, Adrian said. The silence that followed was sharp. Bennett Lang muttered. Ah, yes, the journalist. Surprised she's still around. That one gave us headaches. Adrian's voice hardened. You ruined her career. Lang laughed softly. She ruined her own. We just played defense. You pulled her from treatment, Adrian said. You knew she needed it. Business is business, Lang replied. She violated her contract when she went public. I thought you of all people would understand that. Adrian ended the call mid-sentence. The rage that followed felt different from anything he'd known before. Not the kind born of losing money or a deal, but the kind that comes when you finally see the cruelty you've profited from. He looked around Maya's small apartment again, the coffee mug, the old computer, the bills, the books. And for the first time, the empire he had built felt cheap. He picked up her journal one last time and whispered, You shouldn't have had to fight alone. When he returned to the hospital that evening, he carried her laptop and the envelope addressed to Axiom. Nurse Morales met him at the door. She's still unconscious, she said, but her vitals are improving. He nodded and placed the items on the table beside her bed. Then, almost without thinking, he whispered, "I know who you are now, Maya, and I swear they won't bury your truth again." As the monitors kept their rhythm, Adrian realized something fundamental had shifted. The woman he thought was just his assistant had once stood against giants. Now it was his turn. The next morning, the boardroom of Coal Dynamics was a battlefield, dressed in glass and steel. The skyline burned gold behind the windows, but inside the air was colder than the winter outside. Adrian sat at the head of the table, the faces around him taut with unease. Charts and projections flickered across the wall screen. "You're suggesting we suspend the merger," said Martin Graves, his CFO disbelief sharpening every syllable. "Adrian, that's a $10 billion partnership. Are you out of your mind?" Adrian folded his hands, voice low but steady. "I'm suggesting we halt negotiations until Axiom's ethics investigation is complete." "What investigation?" another executive snapped. "They're the cleanest partner we've had in years." Adrian met his gaze without blinking. "That's what I thought too." The room erupted. Voices collided, numbers thrown like bullets. "You want to gamble our future because of one employee. You're risking the entire board's trust. Are you protecting her or protecting yourself?" Adrian stood silencing them. "We'll resume this discussion once I have answers. Until then, all deals are frozen." He walked out before they could respond, his footsteps echoing down the marble hall. Outside, snow began to fall, coating the city in silent white. He didn't return to his penthouse. He went back to St. Luke's. The hospital smelled the same sterile relentless. When he reached Maya's room, the monitors still pulsed steadily. But this time her eyes were open. For a moment he stood frozen, uncertain whether to speak. Her gaze shifted toward him, confusion flickering before recognition. "Mr. Cole," she said weakly, her voice hoarse. "You didn't have to come. You shouldn't be alone," he said quietly. "Apparently I'm good at it." She murmured, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. He pulled the chair closer to her bed. "The doctor says you're improving." "That's generous," she said. "I still can't sit up without feeling like the room's on a carousel." "You'll get stronger," he said, trying for certainty. "You need proper treatment." Axiom's trial. Her eyes snapped to him. "Don't. Maya, you." "I said don't," she whispered fiercely. "They took everything from me once. I'm not giving them the rest." "You were a journalist," he said. "You exposed them." Her expression froze. "You went through my apartment. I had to know," he admitted. "You were lying here dying, and I didn't even know who you were." She turned her head toward the window, snowlight softening the bruised shadows beneath her eyes. "You didn't need to know. You're my boss. That's all." "Why me?" he asked suddenly. "Why list me as your emergency contact?" "Because there was no one else," she said simply. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Silence expanded between them. The only sound was the hum of the oxygen machine and the distant shuffle of nurses' shoes. Adrian looked at her, seeing the edges of the woman he'd overlooked every day. The strength beneath exhaustion, the quiet pride that refused pity. "You've been fighting this alone for how long?" he asked. "Since before I started working for you," she said. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters to me," he said. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "You're 2 years late." A nurse entered with medication, breaking the tension. "Ms. Bennett, time for your antibiotics." Maya reached for the cup, but her hand trembled, spilling half the water. Adrian moved instinctively, catching her wrist before it fell. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, The room felt smaller, the air charged with something fragile and human. His hand lingered longer than necessary as he steadied the glass for her. She looked away quickly. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice tight. "You have a company to run." "Let them wait," he said. "They won't understand." "Neither do I," she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth was, he didn't know. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe something deeper that had been growing unnoticed every time she'd looked at him without expectation. "Because no one else will," he said finally. "And because I can." She stared at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then she said softly, "You can't fix this with money." "I'm not trying to," he replied. "I'm trying to fix myself." She turned her face away, eyes glistening. "You're not the one who needs saving. Maybe we both do." The words slipped out before he could stop them. She didn't answer. The nurse returned, adjusting her IV, and Adrian stepped back. He watched her eyelids flutter exhaustion, dragging her towards sleep. As she drifted off, she murmured something almost too soft to catch. "Don't make promises you can't keep." He sat in silence long after she slept. The faint rise and fall of her chest, the only sign of life, in a world that suddenly felt too fragile. When he finally left the room, the hallway lights had dimmed for the night shift. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. Somewhere below, the city roared on oblivious. His phone buzzed with a message from Martin. "The board is furious. Lang's threatening legal action if we back out." Adrian typed one sentence before turning the phone off again. "Tell them to wait." Then he slipped the device into his pocket and returned to her room just to watch her breathe. For once in his life, power meant nothing. Only presence did. By the end of the week, the story that had started in a hospital room exploded across every major outlet in the country. Cole Dynamics' merger with Axiom Biotech was supposed to be the biggest tech-pharma alliance of the decade, but now the headlines screamed betrayal and scandal. "Billionaire CEO halts billion-dollar deal for sick employee," read the New York Ledger. "Corporate savior or secret affair," blared another. Adrian's photo was everywhere leaving the hospital, standing beside Maya's bed, caught by some paparazzi lens that turned compassion into controversy. His phone wouldn't stop ringing each call from the board, more furious than the last. Martin's voice cracked through the line. "This is out of control, Adrian. The stock's down 12 points since yesterday. You need to make a statement, deny whatever they're implying." Adrian stood at his office window, watching snow fall over Manhattan. "I'll make a statement," he said quietly, "but not the one they want." That afternoon, he called a press conference at the company's headquarters. Cameras flooded the lobby microphones like a wall of steel and judgment. The press loved him before. Now they came to watch him burn. "Mr. Cole," one reporter shouted as he approached the podium, "is it true you're romantically involved with your assistant? Are you protecting her because she exposed your business partner? Did you end the merger to avoid a lawsuit?" The room buzzed with chaos until he raised a hand. Silence fell tense and heavy. Cole Dynamics has suspended all negotiations with Axiom Biotech. Adrian began, his tone clear and deliberate. "We've also opened an internal ethics review into their clinical practices. This isn't about rumors, it's about responsibility." A woman in the front row called out, "And what about Ms. Bennett?" His eyes flickered. "Ms. Bennett is one of our employees. She's currently hospitalized. She's also a victim of systemic negligence within our own industry." What's happening to her could happen to anyone. But why risk your career for one person? Another voice demanded. Adrian's jaw tightened. Because silence is also a choice, he said evenly. And I've been silent too long. The quote would go viral within hours. By nightfall, it was plastered across every platform. Some praised his courage, others mocked his hypocrisy. Hashtags like Coal Crisis and Billionaire Saves Her trended worldwide. People dissected his motives, his tone, his expression. Even his tailored suit became a meme. At St. Luke's, the nurses watched the broadcast from the waiting room. "That's your boss," one asked Maya, who was sitting up now, a blanket over her shoulders. "That's him," she said quietly, eyes glued to the screen. Adrian's image filled the TV, every word calm and measured, but the look in his eyes, she recognized that. It was the same look he'd had when he thought she was asleep. The look of a man trying to save something he didn't understand yet. Her chest ached. "You should rest," Nurse Morales said gently. "You've been through enough." "No," Maya murmured. "This is just beginning." She reached for her phone, the notifications endless. Hundreds of messages from unknown numbers, some kind most cruel. Gold digger, corporate pawn, faker, and worse. She turned it off, pressing it face down on the tray. That night, Adrian's office turned into a war room. His PR chief, legal counsel, and senior team argued in circles. "You've linked the company to a dying employee," Adrian said, the legal head. "If she passes, we'll be blamed for negligence. If she lives, we'll be blamed for favoritism," Martin added. "There's no winning this." Adrian leaned forward. "We're not here to win. We're here to do what's right." "Right doesn't pay dividends," the lawyer shot back. "Neither does cowardice," Adrian replied. He dismissed them all. When the office finally emptied, he sat alone in the dark city, lights flickering below. He thought about the article he had read in her apartment, the photo of her defiant at that old press conference. She had stood against Axiom once, and now somehow he had taken up the fight she started. His intercom buzzed softly. "Sir, she's on line 1, his assistant said. He froze. "Maya." The connection crackled. Her voice tired but steady. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "You made it worse." "They were going to find out anyway," he replied. "Better from me than from them. Now everyone thinks I'm your charity case. I don't care what they think, but I do." Her voice broke the first crack of emotion since she'd woken. "Do you have any idea what it's like to lose everything once and watch it happen again? They'll dig up my past, twist it until there's nothing left. Then we'll fight them," he said. Together, silence filled the line for several seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "You can't fight what people want to believe." He exhaled. "Maya, you're not alone anymore. You don't know what that means," she whispered. Then the line went dead. Adrian sat there, the quiet hum of the city, pressing in. Outside headlines flashed across the news ticker on the Times Tower Coal's reckless gamble. "Investors demand answers." Across town, Victor Lang watched the same broadcast from his penthouse suite. He smirked, swirling his drink. "Poor Adrian," he murmured. "Doesn't know he's already lost." He made a call. "Get the documents ready. Let's remind the world who Maya Bennett really is." The next morning, Adrian walked into the office to find chaos waiting. The lobby filled with reporters again, their questions sharper, crueler. Axiom CEO accuses Coal's assistant of falsifying data in past investigation. Leaked court records, partial transcripts, all designed to humiliate her. He slammed his office door and called Lang directly. "You think this will scare me?" Lang laughed. "Just business, my friend. You chose the wrong side. You silenced her once. You won't do it again. You'd destroy yourself for a woman who lied to you. She told the truth, Adrian said. You're just terrified the world's about to remember it. Lang chuckled. Then let's see how long your conscience keeps your company afloat. The call ended, leaving the office humming with tension. Adrian turned toward the window, the city alive below him, ruthless and unblinking. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about shareholders or quarterly gains. He was thinking about a woman in a hospital bed who had risked everything for the truth, and about the storm he had willingly stepped into for her. Somewhere deep down, he understood this was more than a scandal. It was the moment his soul finally woke up. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within. Reporters camped beneath the Coal Dynamics tower lights, flashing like lightning every time Adrian appeared near the glass lobby doors. It had been 48 hours since Axiom released their smear campaign, and Maya hadn't answered a single call. He'd sent flowers messages, even a lawyer, to ensure her safety, but all were returned or ignored. On the third night, his phone finally lit up. "Stop," she said before he could speak. "Just stop trying to save me." Her voice was ragged, brittle. "Maya, please." "You made it worse," she said. "You went on national television and turned me into a headline again. I've already lived this once. I don't need your pity sequel." "It's not pity," he said sharply. "It's what redemption conscience. I don't want to be your Project Adrian." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing in the dark of his office. "This isn't about the company anymore. It always is," she said. "You don't even realize it. You think you're being noble, but you're still in control. You decide when to help, how to help who deserves it." "You think I planned this?" he snapped. "You think I wanted any of this to happen?" "No," she said quietly, her tone breaking. "That's what makes it worse. You mean well, but you don't understand what it's like to have your life destroyed by people who mean well." "Then explain it to me," he said. "Help me understand." She laughed once hollow. "You can't, because tomorrow you'll still have a company, and I'll still have nothing." Then the line went dead. He stood there, phone pressed to his ear, long after the silence had settled. The next morning she was gone from the hospital. Nurse Morales told him she signed herself out against medical advice. "She said she needed air," the nurse murmured. She looked determined. Panic ripped through him as he ordered his driver to circle every possible place she might go. Brooklyn, her old building, the pier near the East River, where she used to walk after work. Nothing. When he finally found her, it was snowing hard, the sky the color of bruised steel. She was sitting on a bench outside a church, wearing her hospital coat IV bandage still taped to her arm. "You shouldn't be here," he said, breath clouding in the freezing air. "Neither should you," she replied without looking up. "Aren't you supposed to be saving your empire?" "I don't care about that right now." "You should. They're probably tearing you apart on TV. Let them." She finally looked at him, eyes glassy from exhaustion. "You're out of your mind." "Maybe," he said softly, "but at least now I'm losing it for the right reasons." For a moment neither spoke. Snow landed on her hair, melting into her lashes. "You can't keep following me," she whispered. "You can't fix this." "I'm not here to fix you," he said. "I'm here because I can't stand the thought of you disappearing again." "Don't make this harder," she said. "I've already accepted it. The treatments don't work. The money's gone. The damage is done." "That's not true," he said, crouching beside her. "There's still a chance. We'll find a donor." "We?" She shook her head weakly. You keep saying that word like we're on the same side of something, but we're not, Adrian. You're still the man who profits from the system that broke me. His throat tightened. Then let me change it. You can't. I can try, he said, but I can't do it if you're gone. Her breath shuddered. You're wasting your time. It's my time to waste. He sat beside her close enough to feel her trembling. For a long while, they just listened to the wind. Then she said quietly, I used to dream about someone finding me here, not a boss or a savior, just someone who saw me before I disappeared completely. I see you, he whispered. No, she said, tears pooling now. You see the version of me you want to save. The girl in your redemption story. Not the one who's terrified and angry and so damn tired. Then show me that version, he said. I'll still stay. She turned toward him slowly, eyes full of something raw and breaking. You don't know what you're asking for. I do, he said. I'm asking for honesty. Just this once. No walls. Her breath caught, and for a long second, the world felt suspended between them. Then she said it the truth he hadn't been ready to hear. I'm dying, Adrian. He shook his head. No, the transplant list is long. The odds aren't good. I stopped believing in miracles a long time ago. Then let me believe for you, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You don't have to fight this alone. Her hands were shaking, and he reached out gently, covering them with his own. You don't have to keep pretending to be strong, he murmured. Not with me. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Why are you doing this to yourself? Because I can't stop. She let out a shaky breath, and for a moment her fingers intertwined with his. You're going to regret this, she said softly. Maybe, he whispered. But right now I'd regret walking away a lot more. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang through the snow. She leaned against him, exhaustion finally winning. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her as if sheer will could keep her alive. Hours later, back at St. Luke's, the doctor's voice was grim. Her bone marrow function has collapsed completely. If we don't find a match in the next 48 hours. Adrian closed his eyes, the words barely registered. He sat by her bedside again, the steady beep of the monitors marking time he couldn't afford to lose. Her skin was pale, her lips chapped. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Please, he whispered, voice breaking. Don't go. I'm not done learning how to love yet. The room was quiet, except for the hum of machines and his own uneven breathing. Somewhere beyond the sterile walls, the city moved on, indifferent to the lives unraveling within it. But in that moment for Adrian Cole, the world had narrowed to one fragile heartbeat. And he wasn't leaving until it was safe again. The morning after her collapse, Adrian Cole stopped being the CEO who followed protocol. He became the man who broke every rule that once defined him. By sunrise, his office had turned into an impromptu command center walls, plastered with medical research donor registries and corporate legal drafts. The team stared at him as he spoke, with the calm of someone standing on the edge of a fire. We're opening a public investigation into Axiom Biotech, he said, effective immediately. Martin blinked. You can't, we can? Adrian interrupted. And we will. They denied experimental medication to patients like Maya to cover for side effects they knew existed. We're going to prove it. You're going to bankrupt yourself, Martin said quietly. Then I'll be bankrupt for the right reason. The news hit Wall Street within hours. Investors called him suicidal. Activists called him a hero. Reporters swarmed the hospital, hoping for a glimpse of the woman at the center of it all. Maya remained unconscious, her body fragile beneath tubes and sensors, while Adrian's war with Axiom tore through every headline. That night, in a dim meeting room across town, Victor Lang faced his legal team. "He's opening old files," one attorney warned. "Cole's trying to access patient data from the 2018 trials, then make him regret it." Lang said coldly, "If he drags us down, he's coming with us." Back at St. Luke's, Adrian sat by Maya's bedside, scrolling through medical reports. Her condition was critical. Only a bone marrow transplant could save her now. He had already signed a check for a new patient assistance fund, and a private lab was running DNA matches across the country. Every beep of the monitor felt like a countdown. When the door opened, Nurse Morales stepped in. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "there's been a match, a donor from Arizona. The problem is the cost air transport surgery legal fees." "Do it," he said without hesitation. "We'll cover everything. Insurance won't, then I will." His voice broke the air like glass. "Just save her." The nurse nodded and left, and for the first time in days, Adrian leaned back and let himself breathe. Across the city, Axiom's PR machine went into overdrive, calling him emotionally compromised, unfit to lead, reckless. The board called an emergency meeting. When he walked into the room, the tension was suffocating. "You're finished," one director said flatly. "The SEC's investigating insider trading rumors. Our stock's in free fall." "Then sell," he said simply. "You can't be serious," Martin whispered. Adrian looked around the table, meeting every eye. "If Cole Dynamics falls because it chooses people over profit, maybe it should." No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than any applause. Outside, the media filmed him leaving the building, coat collar turned up against the cold. They shouted questions. "Are you resigning? Is this the end of your empire?" But he didn't answer. He went back to the hospital instead. The transplant team was preparing. Doctors moved around the room with quiet urgency, their voices low, their steps precise. Adrian stood behind the glass window as they wheeled her into surgery. For a moment, her eyes fluttered open, and she saw him. The smallest smile crossed her lips before the sedative pulled her under. Hours passed like years. He sat in the waiting room, hands clasped, watching sunlight fade to dusk. The doctor finally appeared, exhaustion written on his face. "The transplant went well," he said. "She's stable for now. We'll know more in 48 hours." Adrian exhaled, shoulders shaking. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, when the world thought he was defeated, he sat by her bedside again, the monitors casting a soft glow across his face. He spoke quietly, knowing she couldn't hear him, but needing to say it anyway. "I thought power meant control," he murmured. "Turns out it just means responsibility. You showed me that." Outside, snow began to fall again, thicker this time, blanketing the city that had once applauded him for his ambition and now condemned him for his compassion. 2 days later, the impossible happened. Maya's body accepted the transplant. Her vitals stabilized. The doctors called it a miracle. Adrian didn't call it that. He called it justice, because in the same breath, federal investigators announced that Cole Dynamics had provided evidence linking Axiom to years of falsified reports and patient harm. Lang's empire collapsed overnight. The company's stock plummeted, executives were arrested, and the name that once stood beside his now burned in public shame. Adrian didn't celebrate. He just stood by the window of Maya's room watching her breathe, her color slowly returning, and thought she would have fought for this, even if it killed her. When she finally woke, he was asleep in the chair beside her tie, undone exhaustion carving lines into his face. "You did it," she whispered, voice barely audible. His eyes opened instantly. "You're awake. You shouldn't have." "I had to," he interrupted softly. They needed to be held accountable. "You risked everything," she said weakly. "Then it was worth it," he replied. She studied him, eyes softening. "You look different. Maybe I finally started becoming someone you wouldn't have to expose." She smiled faintly, the first genuine one in weeks. "You already were," she said. "You just didn't know it yet." Outside, dawn light broke through the snow clouds, painting the sterile hospital room in gold. For the first time in a long time, Adrian Cole didn't feel like a man fighting the world. He felt like a man who'd finally learned how to stand in it, with his heart uncovered, his armor gone, and the woman who made him human breathing again beside him. 3 months later, the headlines had shifted to a new scandal. The city had found a new story to consume, and the world that once screamed his name had gone quiet. The snow was gone, replaced by the thaw of early spring, yet the silence between Adrian and Maya felt colder than any winter. She was recovering well, her blood count strong, her steps steadier, but something in her had changed. Gratitude had replaced the fire in her eyes, and gratitude was not love. Adrian visited often, at first always bringing books, coffee, or quiet company. But each time she smiled a little more gently, spoke a little less, till one day she said, "You don't have to come every day." "I know," he said, standing by the window. "Then why do you?" "Because I want to." "That's the problem," she whispered, not meeting his eyes. A week later, she was discharged. He offered to drive her home. She declined. He offered to hire a nurse. She said she'd manage, and so she did without him. He threw himself into rebuilding Cole Dynamics, not for shareholders or image, but for purpose. The company was now funding independent clinical trials, establishing patient support programs, and sponsoring journalists investigating corporate malpractice. Everything Maya had once fought for, he made real. Yet every success felt hollow without her. He told himself she needed space, but what he really feared was that she needed freedom from him. The first time he saw her again, it was by accident. She was walking out of a small community clinic in Brooklyn, hair tied back, clipboard in hand. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, and a smile that belonged to someone who'd made peace with herself. He stayed across the street, unseen, watching her help an old man with his coat. She looked happy, happier than she'd ever been beside him. He didn't call out. He couldn't. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at his office. No return address, just his name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single page. "Adrian, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done, not just for me, but for everyone who couldn't fight back. You saved my life, but now I need to live it on my own. There was a time when I thought love meant holding on. Now I think maybe it's learning when to let go. Please don't look for me. You've already given me enough." He sat there in his office letter, trembling in his hands, the city humming quietly beyond the glass. For a long time he couldn't breathe. Then he folded the letter, carefully placed it in his wallet, and carried it everywhere after that. As if it were a heartbeat he didn't want to lose. Weeks passed, and though the world had moved, on small things reminded him of her. A coffee cup left half-finished, the scent of her shampoo when someone brushed past in the elevator, the word hope printed on a billboard. Each detail a reminder of something that had never really been his to keep. One night he returned to her hospital room, now empty. The bed stripped, the machines gone. Only the faint indent on the pillow remained, and a wilted flower on the window sill. He touched the glass, the city lights reflected back at him, and thought of the woman who had changed the way he saw everything. He remembered her saying, "You can't fix this with money." She had been right. He couldn't fix her or himself or the world, but he could start by listening. In the following months, he stopped attending corporate galas. Instead, he visited hospitals, community centers, and shelters his company had funded. Sometimes people recognized him and thanked him. He always shook his head and said, "Thank her instead." But no one knew where she was, until one morning while reviewing a new grant proposal for nonprofit clinics, he noticed a name in the applicant list, Maya Bennett, Director of Outreach, the Hope Initiative. His chest tightened, a mixture of pride and longing that felt almost unbearable. He didn't call her. He couldn't risk undoing the peace she had built. But he began donating anonymously to her program, Watching from Afar, as her work spread hope through neighborhoods he used to drive past without noticing. Every few months, a small update would cross his desk, a report, a newsletter, a photograph of volunteers handing out medication to patients who couldn't afford it. In one photo, she was standing at the back of the crowd, smiling toward the children she was helping. He printed that photo and kept it in his desk drawer. Late at night, when the office was empty, he would take it out and stare at it, remembering the sound of her laugh, the way her eyes softened when she talked about truth. He realized that loving her didn't mean having her near it, meant carrying the world she'd shown him forward. Still, there were nights when the silence pressed too hard, when he wondered if she ever thought of him. In those moments, he would open his wallet, unfold the letter, and read it again. The ink had faded slightly, but the words never lost their weight. "You saved my life. Now let me live it." He would trace the handwriting with his thumb and whisper, "You're still living in everything I do." On his desk sat a small succulent she had once brought to his office, a resilient plant that thrived even when neglected. He watered it once a week religiously. It had grown taller, its leaves reaching toward the light. Some nights he imagined she was like that plant, quietly surviving, finding sunlight wherever she went. And though he never called, never wrote back, he knew deep down that their story wasn't finished. It was simply breathing, waiting like a heartbeat between pauses. 1 year later, the city glowed in soft gold as spring turned to summer, and the Cole Foundation prepared for the biggest night of its existence. The Gala of Hope banners lined Fifth Avenue, elegant and understated, carrying a message that meant more than money ever could. The event was held in the restored Metropolitan Hall, where crystal chandeliers reflected light like the promises of redemption. Every major figure in medicine, journalism, and philanthropy was there, drawn by the curiosity of what Adrian Cole would do next. He hadn't been seen in public since the Axiom trial. Rumors said he'd lost everything. Others claimed he'd gained something greater. As the orchestra tuned and the chatter filled the marble hall, he arrived quietly through a side entrance, no press, no fanfare, just a man in a black suit, thinner, now calmer, but with a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The foundation staff greeted him with relief. "Sir, the keynote starts in 10 minutes. The guest speakers already arrived." "Guest speaker?" he asked, scanning the program handed to him. His eyes froze. "Keynote address, Maya Bennett, Director, the Hope Initiative." The paper trembled slightly between his fingers. He looked up at the stage where the podium gleamed under soft white light, and for a moment, time folded in on itself. She was here. He stayed in the shadows as the gala began. The host introduced the event as a celebration of courage and compassion, honoring those who had rebuilt trust between corporations and the people they served. Donors applauded, camera flashes went off, and then her name was called. She stepped onto the stage wearing a simple dark blue dress, her hair down, no jewelry except a small silver pendant. The room fell silent, not from awe but reverence. Maya began softly, her voice steady, her gaze sweeping across hundreds of faces. A year ago, I was lying in a hospital bed, certain I wouldn't see another sunrise, she said. I'd lost faith in systems, in justice, even in hope. But sometimes life gives you the gift of being wrong. Laughter rippled gently through the room. When I first started the Hope Initiative, I didn't have money or power. I had a story, and stories, when told honestly, can rebuild worlds. Her eyes softened, though they didn't search for anyone in particular. Tonight isn't about me. It's about everyone who refused to stay silent. It's about the people who choose to do the right thing when no one's watching. Adrian stood near the back, his chest tightening with pride and pain all at once. The audience erupted into applause, rising to their feet as she stepped down from the podium. Photographers swarmed, lights flashing like stars. He didn't move. He couldn't. When the speeches ended and the orchestra began to play, guests mingled with champagne and polite laughter, unaware of the quiet gravity in one corner of the room. Maya stood near an exhibit of photographs showing children, patients, and volunteers from her clinic's images of life after despair. She smiled as donors congratulated her, but when she turned, her eyes caught something familiar. He was standing by the column near the exit, watching her with a kind of quiet reverence that made the noise of the gala fade away. For a second, neither moved. Then she walked toward him. The crowd seemed to part, as if sensing something sacred unfolding. "You came," she said, her voice low, almost disbelieving. "Would have been rude to miss your party," he replied softly. "It's not my party, it's your legacy," he said. "You built this." "We both did," she said. "You started the foundation. I just gave it a name. You gave it meaning," he said. A small silence stretched between them, charged but gentle. "You look different," she said finally. "You too. Better or worse," she teased. "Alive," he said. That one word carried everything they hadn't said for months. Around them the music swelled, a slow, timeless waltz, and couples began to dance. He offered his hand, hesitant but certain. One dance. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. One, she said. They moved together slowly across the marble floor, not speaking, just breathing in rhythm with the music. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them was trying to fix or save or understand. They were just there. When the song ended, she stepped back slightly, her eyes shimmering. "You kept your promise," she said. "Which one you said you'd learn how to love." "Looks like you did, only because you taught me." She smiled faintly. "I didn't teach you, you just listened." From her clutch, she pulled a small pot wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. "This is for you." He looked at it confused. "A plant, a succulent," she said. "It survives even in dry places." He took it gently, tracing the edges of its green leaves. "It's perfect," he murmured. "It's what you are," she said softly. "You survived." He looked up at her, eyes bright. "So did you." For a heartbeat, the world around them blurred, the glittering hall, the murmuring crowd, the echoes of music, And it was just them, the two people who had once been broken by the same system, now standing in the light they'd rebuilt. "You used to write stories that changed the world," he said quietly. "Now I just try to change one life at a time," she replied. "You already changed mine." She smiled, and before turning away, she touched his hand once more. "Keep growing," she said, "like that plant." "Will I see you again?" he asked. "Maybe," she said, "but if not, you'll still know where to find me. Where anywhere hope is still alive." Then she walked away, disappearing into the crowd of people she'd inspired. He stood there for a long time, the succulent cradled in his hands, until a journalist approached, microphone ready. "Mr. Cole," the reporter said, "is this the end of your story, or just the beginning?" Adrian smiled faintly, eyes on the little plant. "Hope doesn't end," he said. "It just grows." And as the lights dimmed and the orchestra played the final song, the man who once built empires with steel and glass finally understood that the greatest thing he'd ever created was a space for someone else's heart to bloom. A year later, the city woke beneath a calm sunrise, the kind that painted the skyline in soft gold and washed away the noise of everything that came before. Inside a smaller, humbler office than the one he'd ruled from years ago, Adrian Cole sat at his desk, surrounded by papers, grant proposals, and hand-drawn thank you notes from children. The Cole Foundation had merged quietly into the Hope Initiative, no longer bearing his name alone. He didn't need it to. On the corner of his desk sat the same small succulent Maya had given him, its leaves fuller, now a quiet testament to survival. He reached out and turned the pot slightly toward the light. His assistant Claire stepped into the room. "Morning, Mr. Cole. The press wants a statement about the anniversary of the Hope Initiative's first clinic. Do you want me to draft one?" He smiled faintly. "No press statements. Just send a letter to the staff thanking them." She nodded, then hesitated. "You know they say she's going to be there today? The new children's unit, I know," he said. Claire lingered a moment longer, curiosity flickering in her expression, then left. When the door closed, the silence wrapped around him, not heavy but peaceful. He leaned back, gazing at the framed photo on the wall, a group of nurses, doctors, and volunteers standing in front of a community health center. Maya was somewhere in the middle, laughing sunlight, catching the strands of her hair. He'd memorized that picture 100 times, yet each time it felt like seeing her again for the first time. His phone buzzed, vibrating against the desk. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it until he noticed the name attached, the Hope Initiative. Something in him stilled. He answered. "Mr. Cole," a woman's voice said warmly. "This is Erin from the Hope Initiative. You're listed as one of our original founders. We're opening a new children's unit this weekend, and we need volunteers. Would you be available Saturday?" He smiled to himself, a quiet, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The next morning the air smelled of spring rain as he drove across the bridge to Brooklyn. The new clinic was modest but alive with energy. Bright murals on the walls, laughter echoing from the playground, outside volunteers unpacking supplies. The banner above the door read, "The Hope Initiative, where healing begins." He parked quietly, unnoticed among the crowd. Inside, the hum of life filled the halls. Nurses guided families through check-ins, children clutched stuffed animals, and doctors in scrubs carried clipboards. He walked past a mural depicting a tree whose roots intertwined with words, truth, compassion, justice. It made him stop. For a moment he saw her hand in that design, her belief in symbols that outlast pain. He turned a corner and froze. She was there. Maya stood near a group of volunteers giving directions, her voice calm but full of purpose. She wore a light linen blouse, her hair shorter now, her face radiant with quiet confidence. If she noticed him, she didn't show it at first. She was laughing at something a little boy said, crouching to tie his shoelaces. When she finally looked up, her gaze caught his. The noise around them faded, replaced by the silent recognition of everything that had passed between them. "You came," she said softly as he approached. "You called," he replied. "Not me," she said, smiling. "Fate, maybe." "Then I'm glad fate still remembers my number." She laughed, the sound like sunlight on water. "You look," she paused, searching for the right word, "different." "I stopped trying to be someone else's idea of success," he said. "Turns out being human takes more work." "You're doing well," she said, nodding toward the volunteers. "The foundation's changed lives." "Our foundation," he corrected gently. She looked down for a moment, as if hiding a blush. "I didn't do it alone." "You never had to," he said. "You just forgot you didn't." She hesitated, then gestured toward a window overlooking the children's ward. "Come see something." Together they stood behind the glass as a group of young patients painted with volunteers' bright colors, spreading across blank canvases. "They're part of the new art therapy program," she explained. "Helps them express what the medicine can't." He nodded, eyes soft. "It's beautiful." "It's honest," she said. "Sometimes that's rarer." Silence settled again, gentle but meaningful. Then she said quietly, "Do you remember what you told me that night in the hospital? I said a lot of things. I wasn't sure I meant," he said, half smiling. "You said, 'Please don't go. I'm not done learning how to love yet.'" He turned toward her. "And did I ever finish?" maybe she said. "Or maybe love isn't something you finish. Maybe it's what keeps you unfinished. You sound like the journalist you used to be." "I still write," she admitted. "Just not for papers anymore, for people." "What kind of people?" "The ones who still believe stories can heal." He watched her for a long moment, the weight of her words anchoring something in him. "I've missed you," he said simply. "I know," she replied. "And I missed who I was when you believed in me. Then maybe we can meet again as who we've become." She smiled, bittersweet but real. "Maybe we already have." A nurse approached to remind her of a meeting, and she nodded. "Duty calls," she said lightly. "You know how that goes." "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "But sometimes you answer anyway." She paused, then took a small note card from her pocket. "Here," she said, pressing it into his palm. "For the volunteer's log." When she walked away, he looked down. On the card in her handwriting was a single line. "The most important calls are the ones you never expect." His throat tightened as he turned it over. On the back, another message. "Thank you for answering mine." The day stretched on, full of laughter and stories. He spent hours helping children build small clay sculptures, listening to their dreams, their simple bravery, reminding him why he had fought so hard to protect something pure. At sunset, he stepped outside, the sky painted in coral and violet. Maya was sitting on the clinic steps, watching the children play in the courtyard. He sat beside her. Neither spoke for a while. Then she said, "You know, I used to think happy endings were about people ending up together. And now I think it's about ending up whole." "You're whole now," he said. "So are you," she replied. They sat there as the sun dipped below the skyline, and for the first time in a long time, both felt no need to fill the silence. When the lights of the clinic flickered on, Maya stood and turned to him. "There's one more patient inside, who hasn't been seen yet," who he asked, rising. She smiled. "You." Before he could respond, she slipped back through the doors, her laughter echoing softly in the hall. He followed, unsure whether she meant his heart or something deeper. Inside, the corridor glowed with warm light. The mural of the tree stretched across the wall, its branches reaching higher, now freshly painted. Someone had added a new word among the roots' love. He stopped beneath it, looking up, and realized that maybe this was the end he'd been chasing all along. Not the closing of a story, but the quiet beginning of something that finally made sense. Later that night, back in his apartment, the phone on his desk rang once more. He hesitated, then picked it up. "Mr. Cole," a familiar nurse's voice said, "this is St. Luke's Hospital. We just wanted to let you know that Maya Bennett asked us to update your contact information. You're still listed as her emergency contact. Should we remove it?" He smiled slowly, heartful eyes glistening. "No," he said softly. "Keep it." When he hung up, he looked around his quiet home, the light spilling across the floor, the plant thriving by the window, the city beyond alive with 1,000 unseen stories. He picked up the note card she'd given him and set it beside the succulent, whispering the words, as if anchoring them into the universe. "The most important calls are the ones you never expect." Then, somewhere deep inside the world, shifted not in chaos or shock, but in peace. Because love, he realized, wasn't the kind of thing you waited to come back. It was the kind of thing you answered. Before you scroll away, take a breath. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of the people you once loved, or the calls you once ignored, or the second chances you still believe in, don't let it fade when the screen goes dark. Because somewhere out there, someone's waiting for a sign to believe that hope still matters. Maybe that person is you. Maybe it's someone who doesn't know yet that the smallest act of compassion can rewrite an entire life. So before you move on, drop a comment below and tell us what you felt when Adrian picked up that call, when he stayed beside her instead of walking away. Would you have done the same? Have you ever been someone's only call, their one last hope? Share it not for us, but because stories grow stronger when they're shared. If this story reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, of how love doesn't always come wrapped in perfection, but in persistence, hit subscribe and stay with us. At Emma's Stories, every tale is a heartbeat, a reminder that even in the chaos of our world, humanity still breathes, still listens, still answers. Tell us where you're watching from. Our community spans from New York to Nairobi, from quiet towns to cities that never sleep, and each comment is a spark that lights the next story we tell. Maybe your words will inspire someone tonight. Maybe your story will be the next one we share. And if you've ever been through loss, betrayal, recovery, or rebirth, know that you're not alone here. This space was built for people who believe in love, not as a fairy tale, but as an act of courage. So type "I believe in second chances" if you do. Or type nothing at all, just feel it, hold it, and let it stay with you when you step back into your own world. Because that's what stories are for, not escape, but return. And if tonight's story reminded you of someone who saved you when you didn't even ask, send them this video. Maybe they need to know they mattered. Maybe they forgot. Before you go, remember what Maya wrote. The most important calls are the ones you never expect. Maybe tonight you're someone's call. Maybe tomorrow you'll need to make one. Either way, answer. And if you want to keep walking this road of stories that heal, click subscribe, turn on the bell, and stay with Emma's stories where every ending is a beginning, and every beginning starts with a heartbeat that says, I'm still here. Tell us your story below, because the next one we write might just be yours.